Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. It's Friday, the 19th of July here in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Lizzie Burden. Coming up today, a major global tech outage hits banks, TV networks, airlines and the London Stock Exchange.
Donald Trump accepts his party's nomination and recounts surviving the assassination attempt.
Plus, speculation mounts. President Biden's grasp on the Democratic presidential nomination appears to be slipping, as reports suggest that Obama has also now weighed in.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
A series of technical glitches has disrupted global services at airlines, banks and the London Stock Exchange after Microsoft reported an outage across its online services. United Airlines, KLM and Delta are among many airlines reporting issues and grounding their planes. Global aviation editor Benedict Camel says the entire world's airlines will be affected by this backlog.
A problem of this magnitude usually takes days to resolve in terms of getting everything back to order. Now, don't expect planes to come falling out of the sky. Let's not panic. But as a precaution, people will be on the ground. You will see planes landing in places they shouldn't be landing, i.e. airports they shouldn't be landing, not in a green field. And getting that system back in, it's a very finely tuned operation. That's going to take a while.
As well as planes, Camel notes that the issues have hit a range of sectors. The LSE's Newswire is down. The Bank of Israel says the outage has caused disruptions to the banking system. And Sky News is off air. Several newspapers have also reported some of the problems stem from CrowdStrike's security software, which points to the widespread nature of the disruption. A spokesperson for Microsoft told Bloomberg that they're continuing to progress on mitigation efforts for the affected Microsoft 365 apps and services, and you've seen CrowdStrike shares dropping 12% amid the reports of the outage.
And now, Donald Trump has delivered his keynote address at the Republican National Convention as he accepted the party's nomination for the presidency. In a speech that veered between calls for unity and divisive rhetoric on a range of topics, Trump began by describing his near-death experience during last Saturday's attempted assassination.
If I had not moved my head at that very last instant, the assassin's bullet would have perfectly hit its mark, and I would not be here tonight. We would not be together.
After recounting the details of the attempt on his life, Trump launched into a broad pitch for a second term as president that started with a call for the country to come together.
Despite such a heinous attack, we unite this evening more determined than ever. I am more determined than ever, and so are you. So is everybody on your side. Our resolve is unbroken, and our purpose is unchanged to deliver a government that serves the American people better than ever before.
However, as the speech went on, Trump delivered an increasingly meandering and grievance-focused address with sweeping pledges to cut taxes, bring down inflation, end illegal immigration and stop foreign wars. But notably, he only directly addressed the current president once by name.
What this administration, the damage that this administration has done, and I say it often, if you took the 10 worst presidents in the history of the United States, think of it, the 10 worst, added them up, they will not have done the damage that Biden has done. I'm only going to use the term once. Biden. I'm not going to use the name anymore, just one time. The damage that he's done to this country is unthinkable. It's unthinkable.
At more than an hour and a half, Trump's was the longest nomination acceptance speech by a Republican or Democrat in the modern era. It brings to a close a Republican convention that has been buoyed by a steady stream of polling showing Trump ahead of Biden on key issues for the November election.
Biden's facing increasingly public warnings to quit the presidential race from top Democratic lawmakers and supporters. That's as aides insist that the president is not wavering and remains dedicated to running while he continues to isolate with COVID-19. Blackstone executive and billionaire Democrat donor John Gray says he hopes Biden thinks about the demands of another term.
The president is a good man. He has been a wonderful public servant. And like Speaker Pelosi said, he's gotten the votes in the Democratic primary. This is his decision. But I would hope he considers the really extreme physical toll of this business, of this job, I should say. I'm going to wait and see what happens here on the Democratic side. I am a Democrat, but I'm going to let the process play out.
Blackstone's John Gray speaking there. Perhaps the harshest blow to his campaign comes from former President Barack Obama. The Washington Post reported that he told allies Biden needs to seriously consider the viability of his campaign. According to a Senate aide, Democrat senators in competitive races are on the verge of calling on the president to step aside, and the only questions are when and how to announce their position.
Now to France. Lawmakers have re-elected a centrist candidate from Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party to lead the National Assembly. Yael Braun-Pivet, reappointed, could be a sign that the president's coalition is best placed to form a new government after the parliament was dissolved last month. Braun-Pivet won the vote by 13 ballots, with support from centrist and centre-right lawmakers outside of her own alliance. Her election isn't directly related to the appointment of a prime minister or the formation of a new French government, but it could give an indication of which coalitions are able to unite behind a single candidate.
And finally, the Englishman Daniel Brown is the surprise clubhouse leader going into the second round of the Open Championship Golf. Round 2 is underway at Royal Troon, where he's still 6 under par, a stroke clear of 2019 winner Shane Lowry, and Brown will be back in action from 11 a.m. UK time today. Several big names haven't made such good starts though. Rory McIlroy's on 7 over, with two-time PGA champion Bryson DeChambeau and Tiger Woods among the other players well off the pace. And it is risk off partly because of this series of technical glitches disrupting services at airlines, banks and the London Stock Exchange, an unusually widespread cascade of failures that have erupted from the US to Asia after Microsoft reported an outage across its online services. And we can get the latest now from our Asia Tech editor Vlad Savov, who joins us from Hong Kong. Vlad, just give us some perspective here.
Well, we really don't know the exact extent of it. It's very interesting because it is, like you say, very widespread, but it isn't necessarily all that deep. It is indeed a cascade. We keep hearing updates from Poland, from Singapore, from Switzerland, all saying that they're having to do things manually as far as airlines go and check-ins. Somebody posted a tweet where they got their first handwritten boarding pass. But it isn't actually grounding airlines and airports at the moment. It's just leading to delays and disruptions more so than anything catastrophic so far.
What do we understand about exactly what's gone wrong in terms of the disruption to the cloud? What is it?
Right. Well, initially what happened was late on Thursday night in the US, this was the first grounding of flights. One smaller airline in the US ground flights, and they said it was Microsoft's Azure cloud services were to blame for that. What Microsoft said, we reached out to them, we spoke with them. They said that they fixed what issues they had with their cloud services in the US. But within a couple of hours later, we saw disruptions showing up in Japan and Australia. Australian banks reported that they were having issues. And it doesn't appear to have something to do with Microsoft. It seems to be separate from the US issues, because at the moment, what we're seeing is impacts across Asia and Europe, none across US services, but that may also change. There is also the indication that CrowdStrike software has played a part in all of this. So it may be a mix of both Microsoft disruptions and CrowdStrike.
Yeah, there's a quote on the T-Live blog on the technical outage, Vlad, a very frustrated system technician on Reddit saying the entire sum of everything that CrowdStrike might ever have prevented is probably less than the damage they just caused. I wonder if you could look at the market impact for us, because also the Bank of Israel seems to have been affected. How widespread is this going to be?
I mean, that's right. Just before coming on for radio, I saw that CrowdStrike share price was down 12%, and it might go further than that. One of the things to bear in mind is that for airlines, this is their peak period. School term just ended in Germany. A whole bunch of people are going off on holiday. So if this does lead to flight cancellations, and because of these delays, they may accumulate on top of each other and cause more disruption with travel, airlines are going to be affected. We did also see some trade The yen, thankfully, after being weak for so long, got an improvement because people saw it as kind of a safe haven for investment, I suppose. So market reaction is going to be, I think it's also going to develop as the story develops. It is still unwinding for us.
No, absolutely. It's ongoing. But Vlad, can you put our minds at rest? Bad actors? Are any bad actors involved? Is it an attack of any kind?
Right. Well, that's the one thing that we've seen zero evidence of. It does appear to be some sort of, again, cascade is probably the best term here. There was probably some glitch with Microsoft, which may have led to a glitch with CrowdStrike, which in turn has led to a whole bunch of other cascading effects. But the thing that is worth also noting here is a lot of this stuff depends on the cloud. It actually illustrates how dependent we are on these internet technologies.
And here I thought we were cruising into the weekend, Caroline. Alas not, the drama continues. Vlad Savov, we thank you, our Asia tech editor, with the latest from Hong Kong. And I have to recommend this T-Live blog on the terminal. It's covering every twist and turn of this technical outage, from the disruption to the airlines, to the banks, to the central banks and the London Stock Exchange. So give it a read. Go to TLIV on the terminal.
Now, Donald Trump delivered his first public address since surviving a failed assassination attempt. He called for unity, tax cuts, closing the US border, ditching what he called the Green New Scam, and ending foreign wars. All of this, of course, when he accepted the nomination from his Republican Party to run as president. And it comes as the Democrats are mired in a debate about whether President Biden should quit the race, if, when, how. Joining us now to discuss is Bloomberg anchor Kriti Gupta. Good morning, Kriti. So this 90-minute speech happened very late overnight for us in the UK. Your impressions of the speech, unifying or divisive?
A little of both, if we can say that. And I'll start with the unifying, because look, he was really compared in a lot of ways to the speech you got out of J.D. Vance just 24 hours prior, which was a very tough on China, tough on Mexico, tough on globalization kind of rhetoric that you saw, which in theory sounds a lot like the Trump 1.0 that we knew, or the policies in his first agenda. But remember, he is trying to really prove not only to his party, but to the entire country that this is a man who wants to be taken seriously, who is not going to be chaotic in his second term than his first term, because that's where he's losing voters, even within his own base. So from a kind of unifying perspective, he's really trying to simmer that down. Divisive, perhaps, though, for a financial community, because it's confusing to have a roadmap like this when you're trying to decide, well, what is President Trump going to be tough on if he's reelected to a second term? And this speech didn't give us much insight on that.
And you talk about persuading people. If you look at the poll gap, is that a response to Trump winning or Biden losing?
That's a good question. This is a little bit of both. I think it's more of a question of odds. It doesn't seem like a reflection of necessarily which candidate is more qualified. So I think I will lean with the latter, Lizzie, to your question, in that this is more of a concern of mental acuity and who can actually do the job. And President Biden in that debate did some serious damage. And whoever the contender is, should Biden step down, doesn't seem to be ensuring much confidence in the continuity. And at least in President Trump's case, there is an argument to be made from independent voters specifically, that with President Trump, we at least have a sense and we know what we're getting, even if the financial community may disagree with that.
Yeah. In terms of what Trump laid out, I mean, it was kind of soaring. Incomes will skyrocket. Inflation will vanish. Jobs will come roaring back. This is obviously typical kind of Trump rhetoric. And yet the promises are so huge and there wasn't much policy detail. And you have to layer into that the idea that Trump was saying that he is the defender of democracy, trying to kind of turn that democratic argument that he is anti-democratic.
He is. And remember, he's really speaking to the very concerns that voters have on him, which is one, from an economic perspective, that tariffs are going to be inflationary. Inflation itself is such a buzzword at the moment, such a kind of cringe word for people on both sides of the Atlantic. Think about it right here in the UK. How many people are looking at potential inflation coming out of the UK government, kind of worried about it? it. It's the same story in the States. If you say inflation is kind of the kiss of death in terms of rhetoric, or perhaps a win, there's also concerns about the deficit. There's concerns about that spending. President Trump is trying to show that he can address all of it, that he can decline the deficit by introducing the tariffs. And even if it is inflationary, or at least said to be, it's bringing back American jobs, it's bringing higher wages, it's solving the public finance issue. So he's really trying to spin it in that sort of way. And there, to be fair, there are historical economics that do support that argument from the 1900s and the 1800s as well, which he's mentioned several times in several of his speeches. In terms of kind of being the Democratic candidate, though, this is again where he really has to prove to even the conservatives within his base that he's not just the MAGA candidate. So if J.D. Vance was the kind of appeasing the MAGA side of the party, he still has to appease the more kind of fiscally conservative side. That was the Nikki Haley's base, for example, or even the religious conservatives, which was Mike Pence's base, which was his former VP. He still has to prove to some of the folks within the Republican Party that he is a man of reason. I think that's what he's trying to do here.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.